So the piece of advice that comes to mind for me is potentially quite a surprising one that when I started my PhD, I had various people saying to me, "Oh, you need to be thinking about the next steps. You need to be thinking about sort of be quite strategic about how you're going to get your next grant, how you're going to get your next position." And I was starting to find this a little bit stressful. I was just starting, and I thought, I just want to focus on what I'm doing really, rather than all this. And a mentor of mine, who is a remarkable lady, professor of tropical hematology in the UK, she said to me, "You might not get anything. You might not. It might stop, and then you do something else interesting, and then you do something else worthwhile." And her advice was essentially, try not to be weighed down too much by that strategic thinking, and instead actually try and enjoy what you're doing now, and trust that the next thing will come up that needs to come up. And I acknowledge that I'm saying that as a white man in the UK with research funding, and that puts me in a very unfair advantage. So that's not going to be that's not going to be universally applicable. But I think at the same time, being a researcher can get to your head about sort of almost directing your life around someone else's sort of requirements or strategies, when actually these are our lives. We need to do things that we believe are intrinsically valuable, rather than just scoring points somewhere. And I found that very freeing.
Okay, so this is a funny one really, and I hope people don't think it's too miserable, but it served me quite well. So my PhD supervisor, Stephen Russell, the first time I conducted an experiment in my PhD in my first week was just a PCR, and it worked, and I got a band on my gel, and he said to me, "This is the most excited and happy you'll ever be in science, so treasure this moment." And although that sounds a bit miserable, it probably was the most excited and happy that I was in science. But that doesn't mean that you don't enjoy or love your career. But I think you've got to learn to not let it make you super happy or super miserable. And it taught me very early on that I shouldn't base my entire happiness on whether an experiment works, a trial gets done, or a paper gets accepted.
The piece of advice that I've had is always be aware of the details and make sure that everything looks right. When you're a statistician, you're dealing with lots of numbers, and it's important not to take those on trust, but actually go in and check and understand what the data are saying to you, and let that guide you as to how you're going to tell the story, not going in with any preconceived ideas.
What was really important for me was to learn that science communication is as much a part of your research career than it is to do excellent science in the lab.
When I was doing my own PhD research, my supervisor at that time always asked me, "What is the question?" So you really should realize every time you're doing research, what is the question? So that's something that I learned, and I'm also learning my own students currently.
I think one of the most important things I've had given to me as a piece of advice over the years is to focus on hiring nice people to do good science. It sounds really simple, but I mean, at the end of the day, you have to spend your time working with people, getting excited about discoveries together, planning experiments together, and it becomes family-like. You spend more time waking with the people in your laboratory than you do with your family often. And so it's really important to have people you can work with, people you can trust, and really build in lab teams that have that mentality is really important.
I think the piece of advice that has stayed with me as an aspiring researcher, which is what I would classify myself as perhaps rather than a scientist, is the old adage, if at first you don't succeed, try again. And to also, I would add to that as well, to try to remember the relevance of your work, and that many amazing scientific breakthroughs come after years of very hard grind, and it will make it worthwhile. And a wrong answer isn't necessarily a bad answer on that journey.
Yeah, I think my first mentor from during my PhD was the first one who really taught me how to do an experiment in the correct way with the positive controls and negative controls that needed to be included. And I still remember how we were sitting at the microscope and looking through some images and then realizing that I did not have prepared the right positive or negative control there. And so I learned a lot from that to see what is really needed to make an experiment successful. Because you can just start and do things, but then if you're not well prepared, then the results are potentially not trustable. So that was a very good advice to make a list, prepare well for your experiments, and then you only have to do it once instead of 10 times before you reach the perfect experiment.